Okay, it is 6:30, February 6th. This is the Sutton Finance and Warrant Advisory Committee, and we will begin our meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so on the agenda tonight, first on the agenda is a discussion with the Blackstone Valley Vocational Technical High School Superintendent, Dr. Michael Fitzpatrick, and Julie Mitchell, the Sutton representative. So we'll go through some budget issues with them, and thank you for coming. And at the end, or after that, we will hear from Jim Smith, town manager, on just some budget issues and an update. So thanks so much for coming. I know we talked about last spring having you come in, and it's great that you can come in before the normal budget process. So.
Thanks. We're pleased to be here. I trust that we continue to demonstrate the respect we have for the 13 finance committees that serve the district and the 126. Marching band,
okay.
But I was
I'm
just.
loud by nature. It's okay.
It's not moving.
You could share this one if you'd like.
Yeah.
That'd be best.
It's all right. We ask the kids to make adjustments every day. So.
There you go.
In any case, we continue to foster and encourage positive professional relationships with each of the 13 town managers, as well as the finance committees that serve us. Some of the things which have occurred since the town meeting is on at least 2 occasions, I've spoken with the town manager, Jim Smith, and Jim coordinated a gathering of the town managers of 7 of our communities that met early in the school year to have, like this, an advance opportunity to review goals, direction, maybe set a tone for budget design, and the constant sensitivity to the limitations that each of the towns have to different capacities. Like the town meeting and this body, Jim had encouraged me on behalf, and to encourage the school committee and the district to continue to give extra attention to the health insurance issue, which has also led the changes that are being proposed at the state for educational reform. There's been an acknowledgement by the Senate bill, otherwise known as the Promise Bill, by the governor's budget, as lean as it may be, but that things like health insurance are underfunded. They never built in any inflationary formulas to do that. Following the meeting with Jim and the other 6 town managers, we embarked upon, and consistent with my promise to you at the town meeting and elsewhere, embarked upon a campaign within the district to transition. Last year, I think there was a 9% increase in health insurance, which was obviously high water mark and not good news. So among the things that we did, we had 6 informational sessions with our staff indicating, promoting strategies and awareness of the need to make this change. We had 3 different meetings of our school committee negotiation team, along with the teachers negotiating team, in a non-negotiation year, because we're not yet in that cycle, to look at the need for impact bargaining and a greater awareness of the 2 options that exist for municipalities and school systems, which is the group insurance or the group insurance-like plan, which can be, I could say, superimposed in proper timing upon municipal groups and collective bargaining. We also met with the insurance broker and with our primary providers, which is Harvard Pilgrim, covers the vast majority of our people. The end result was a 0 increase that'll be part of the budget that we will advance to you for FY20. And I trust that that is very consistent with what Jim and the other town managers, what this body and encouraged us to pursue. I couldn't promise that at the town meeting. I said, if I recall my comments, that we would explore all options to do this and to see what we could do. So I'm delighted to let you know that the budget which has also been discussed with several town managers, including Jim, will include a zero increase for the major insurance provider, Harvard Pilgrim. Another priority that was identified by you and by others was to explore other options. Valley Tech has used the strategy of self-funding a portion of the budget from its reserve, excess and deficiency account. Be free cash for a community, but for us it's excess and deficiency, in the amount of $250,000 to $200,000 to reduce the assessments as an offset strategy, another self-funding device. You had indicated that we should look at the possibility of maybe not doing that and taking that $250,000 and committing it to OPEB because of the liability that we face, and of course everyone faces. And what I did with that is, is the state of Massachusetts, when it changed its certain key financial people in 2016, they notified us at Blackstone Valley Tech and 7 other school systems that they had, the previous state treasurer had not billed the 8 systems for the non-professional staff. This would not be the MTRS, wouldn't be the Teachers Association pension plan. It would be that, which you consider to be the OPEB categories. Then I'll call it support staff, used to be the county retirement plan. And so that the state had overlooked, hadn't billed for 2013 and 2014. And so that caught us and all 8 systems off guard, and we worked with our auditors. I then worked with the other superintendents of those systems that had this common issue, and although some systems it was far greater in the liability factor. I mean, in our case it was $183,000, but for example, Southeastern Regional Voc Tech in the Bridgewater area, it was closer to $600,000 to $800,000. So, in any case, I was successful in convincing my colleagues to stand together, and we filed special legislation. And then I spoke at the State House on more than one occasion. And we worked a gentleman's understanding that we argued that how can you send us billing years, delayed archive type billing, and expect it to be paid in the current year for bills that we never received way back in 2013. Sure. And the general person's understanding, which was brokered, resulted in saying, well, we're going to not pursue it, kind of thing. Let's just say that kind of thing. So, well, it stayed on our books as our annual audit, which we pay for, which we required as a regional system. Our auditors also listed that as liability and said you better cover it because you've been made aware of it. Some of my colleagues wanted to be forgiven forever. I said, no, that's not really fair, because the argument we used in the legislation and the lobbying was that this came out of nowhere. We had no notice of this, and you can't send us old bills. But now that we are on notice, that argument disappears. So we have all 8 systems, and we should agree that we will recognize this and pay it going forward. But we want to be forgiven for that here. And so our auditor agreed that was reasonable. The state has been no pursuit. So when we present the FY20 budget to you, we will be drawing $183,000 of non-tax-paying dollars set aside in an account to cover this possible liability that now is freed up, and we will deposit it to OPEB. So in summary, rather than drawing the assessment offset, okay, which we've done in the past, which is one of your suggestions to look at that, we have secured $183,000 without impacting your assessment or any of the other 12 towns, and we'll use that as an additional contribution over and above any additional money that we've built into the budget. And we also have the modest contribution by all our employees, OPED, which we shared with you previously. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Is it
so the 250?
Yes.
That you were
right
using from the
reserve.
Yeah. That 183 of that?
No. Sorry. Finish question.
No. So is that impacted by? Is what you're saying that the 250 is still going to be handled the same way it's been handled in recent years, or?
In summary, we're going to do both.
Okay.
Without removing the ability to do the reduction or offset of the assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a different plan for that too, but okay. We're going to find another way other than one of the thoughts you suggested, to use freed up money that the state will allow us to commit to our OPEB obligation.
Mhm.
So we don't have to stop doing the offset in
Okay.
order to do that.
All right.
Is that fair?
It does, yeah, and
Both.
actually, just to be clear on it, I think when we talked about I think that came up as a question, you know, is that a good idea that we would use the 250 and apply that to OPEB? And my comment, and I think our comment, is probably the same today, is, again, it's your budget. So I think that if that's, you know, a way to use that, then that's, you know, certainly something you want to consider. And but the 183, I think, is great,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I found that the suggestion had merit to revisit the way we do it. What's the best way to use a pay-down kind of arrangement? What I hope to do in the FY20 budget, when we vote on March 7th, the school committee's hearing, Mrs. Mitchell has been actively involved in that committee and many others in her attendance and participation on the school committee, is we received a little additional money in Chapter 71, the Regional Transportation Account. What I hope to do is draw $25,000 is my current target figure of that additional, I could call it a windfall, but I'm saying, okay, additional state support. And then only ask the excess and deficiency account for $225,000, not $250,000. Kind of wean ourselves a little bit off the dependency of continue to draw upon your bank account.
I think that was the overriding point that we had, not so much that you should use the 250 for OPEB, but that to build a more of a sustaining kind of a budget that didn't use technically one-time monies.
And
Even though you've been doing it year after year after year.
yeah,
You know, I think we had that, we talked
we did
about
have a
that, yeah.
discussion, a little bit of a different viewpoint on that one.
No,
It said-
no, actually, I think you agreed with me.
Well, no, well, that's good.
No, I mean, just
Moving
in
on.
terms of, you know, building the budget over with sustaining revenues, and that, you know, if you don't, then, you know, the budget, you run the risk of, in future, you know.
Yeah,
I've used
the only
one-time
footnote I had on that conversation is that since we've done it 15 times,
Sure.
or maybe more, but I'm saying at least 15
Probably more,
times now, it doesn't have the same risk of one-time revenue like the federal money that people used and then it never repeated. And of course, that obviously starts off with a deficit the very next year. There was no disagreement on the logic of that.
Yeah.
But I think we found a compromise that I think, you know, that'll be part of the FY20 plan, which is to do much of what you've asked, okay? In that health insurance strategies have now led to a zero increase, which is the envy of some kind of thing, and certainly far better than what it was a year ago. And then to be able to draw OPEB, pay down OPEB liability, but not ask the towns to do it, has its hopefully appeal to all 13 towns, and then reducing any dependence upon the E&D offset with other kinds of dollars is also logical, and there's no disagreement that and I recognize fully the risk of using one time without any plan to replenish, creating a deficit for the very next year. We're totally in agreement on that.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Yeah, good.
So there's a couple things I'll share if I.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. It's been of interest to you to see some of the grants and things that we've pursued. This is a snapshot. It's just shy of $2 million of grants that have been acquired since the last budget. Okay.
Great, okay.
And we have others that are still pending.
Mhm.
We take pride in pursuing that. We've actually received compliments. We also recognize that. I'll give you a moment just to. You Vanna White here? What is
Yes,
this? Yeah,
absolutely.
Really?
Don't get up.
Oh, okay. All right. My mother just hit me in the back of the head, but go ahead.
It's okay.
We also recognize that a traditional school system is not considered eligible for some of the money we receive for capital equipment from the governor's office. So there's a fair play argument that we like to promote. But when we secure competitive money from the governor, from the economic bond, which has been equipment focused, it does a lot of things for us. Number one is it upgrades the training opportunities. It further protects the 54-year-old structure of our building, campus. And it, more often than not, removes the capital equipment, or certainly minimizes the capital equipment we ask you to fund within the budget. At the moment, the budget plan has, we're at 3.9% increase, in our planning. We have built that in our estimates of assessments, which I've discussed with Jim, although it was earlier today, now that the governor's numbers are out. The governor's numbers, unfortunately for us and many school systems, is a mere $20 per student, which is less than the $30 a student last year. We're not jealous. We recognize the focus on what they call economically disadvantaged students, and therefore the urban populations, and the challenges they face. It's just that, our responsibilities are to serve the students that we have and the districts that we represent. And I've already sent letters to our 5 reps and 2 senators asking them to increase the per student amount to $100 a student, as an example. I've asked them to fund regional transportation at 80%, and I've asked them to be mindful of other considerations that have financial impact to us. So we'll lobby, we'll testify, and we'll continue to participate. I have served as president of the state superintendent's organization, the state's superintendent's organization, and now president of the state's regional association. And the good news for that is it puts me at the table, okay? And it gives me a heads up oftentimes on opportunities and an ability to influence. And they're not merit badges for a purpose other than have let's say the podium, if you will, and a chance to influence. So we use those, and I regularly report that information to the school committee. So this grant list is a way in which we add to the investment that we ask the towns to make. If the towns like Sutton didn't continue to invest in us, there's no way we would secure additional money, because they wouldn't provide it. The next document is intended to be, hopefully, again, you'll see this is targeted for you, in the sense of the Sutton on the cover. You can see Waters Farm, which we've had some work. This is a summary of some of the things that we do at Valley Tech to enhance, complement, match, subsidize the assessment dollars that allows us to do a lot more than we could if we only relied upon the tax dollars that support the district. If you turn to page 2, you'll see at the list some of the non-taxpayer resources that we draw upon to support public education. And we've been invited to make presentations at different levels, at different organizations, and some of these things. And if I'm going to scan through them, if I may, Jeff? Sure. Okay with you? Yeah. As you'll see, the first category at the bottom of page 2 is different awards. We pursue awards that are consistent with our mission that generate additional dollars. Now, this might save us in professional development costs for staff to strengthen their skills, or to do certain things for students, or to otherwise have access to consultants that we do not have to budget. So it allows us to have a constantly improving environment, which is critical to us for the workforce. If you look at the page, top of page 3, competitive grants, such as those which I distributed to you on the list, many of them are competitive. It shows an example of the way in which, again, we chase down competitive dollars, and oftentimes these organizations that state, federal, private, other nonprofits that announce money, they don't give you a lot of time to respond. And so it's, but our staff has been willing to make the commitment to do that. So the next category is fiscal agent revenue. As a regional system, we have fiscal autonomy, and that it's been advantageous for us occasionally to be a fiscal agent running through our finances and charging a fee, kind of like a bank, I guess you could say in a way, but to manage money that was gifted or awarded to an agency other than ourselves. All right, so This is not with risk to it, because it's more often than not, it's like Department of Elementary and Secondary Education type awards given to an agency or to another system, or multiple school systems and consortia found, and then we've become the fiscal agent, and we get to charge a fee for that, which, doesn't hurt. The third category on page 3 is rebates. We're in constant pursuit of different rebates where they're available. An example of that was after I arrived, I noticed that we had removed an underground oil tank, no longer being used, on the campus, and the system had not applied for the rebate that was available to the state. I discovered that the rebate timetable was not exhausted, so we filled out a quick 2-page application to the state, made the phone calls, made an appearance, and it resulted in $42,000 that helped offset the cost. The bottom one there is the state pothole, which does sound like a road construction Route 90, Chapter 90 activity, but as you probably know, the pothole is the occasional discretionary money that's placed in the budget. We'll see if it comes out of the legislature this time. And more often than not, the pothole money is it has conditions to it, certain eligibility criteria. And we're the only system that I know that has done this. When we discovered that Valley Tech was not eligible, but some of our towns were eligible, we wrote the grants, or worked with the town manager at the time from that community to write a grant to secure pothole monies for that community. And so that has been very rewarding to many of our communities whenever they're eligible. And certainly we would do that for Sutton whenever we discover, working with Jim, that we can assist. Other forms of that are writing letters of support for an application that's submitted or otherwise in support. Any questions on that list? Moving to next page. On top of page 4, we periodically make special petitions to the legislature. It's an old rule that, you're best to have one special request before the legislature all the time. And sometimes you might, strike gold kind of thing. And over the years, we've been successful occasionally in having a special award, not the standard funding, not the governor's budget, but just something that has special funding. And we continue to do that whenever the opportunity presents itself. The next category is environmental impact restitutions. There are companies that have been penalized for environmental inappropriate behavior. And what we've done on more than one occasions is worked with that business and worked with the state environmental people, sometimes to lessen or to alter, instead of a fee just paid and like a penalty for like speeding or something, they've allowed the money to in some form to also be shared with us. To go, because our heating, ventilation, air conditioning, so many of our programs are connected to environmental protection. So it's like having a brownfields issue, and to make amends, sometimes we can receive part of the settlement, and that's part of the plea bargaining that's done by the company. It strengthens their public relations. It oftentimes does. Meanwhile, it creates an alternative revenue stream for us. Vehicle subsidies. Each year I write to the area banks and credit unions asking them for roughly $3,500 for each institution, so we can put their logo on the side of our vans that are used for construction, for articulation, for the home care activities, and so many of the other projects. And the bank then has its logo, or credit union has its logo on the side of the vans that transport 14 students to the work sites and things like that. So it's a nice win-win kind of thing, nice and clean, and it allows us to use that money for the fuel and the oil and maintenance of the vehicles, which our auto technology department takes care of. We have reached out to our alumni periodically. This is a fairly untapped source here, though. Valley Tech certainly can do a lot more with its 54 years of experience, and the alumni that are out there and who own business, things like that. And at some point, we do need to strengthen. Worcester Trade, which has a longer history than us, has done some remarkable things relative to alumni donations. We've only scratched the surface there, but still it continues to be a possible source of that. Cultural grants. Many of the communities, if not all of them, have mini grants, $250, $500 cultural grants that lend themselves to skits, plays, arts, music, all kinds of different things. And since we are a nonprofit regional system serving all 13 towns, we have increased their awareness that we exist outside the town of Upton, in which we're housed, and continue to receive minor grants, but every grant is significant to us, and so we chase that down. In this case, I'm trying to encourage our staff rather than administration to do more pursuit of that type of thing. If you look at the page 5, Valley Tech, as I trust you know, is the first non-new or first renovation school recognized as a green school in the state of Massachusetts. And so we continue to reach out to do things there. One of the things we've done is our business manager has established relationships with a couple of the solar farms. So rather than create additional photovoltaics and other kinds of things on campus, we've been able to access those that are nearby, okay, and still secure some of the rebates and offsets associated with that. The Mass School Building Authority, in our FY20 plan, once again, we will be alerting you that rather than asking Sutton and the other 12 towns to enter into new debt to repair the next section of the 54-year-old roof, okay, we will self-fund again. We will use $716,000 in our current plan, okay, and that's a combination of the excess and deficiency money that we have in our reserve and the sale of property that was gifted to us, but with the permission of the necessary players. I sold the property for $360,000. Okay, it wasn't advantageous to us to develop it. It wasn't on our campus, and it was a combination of the ledge, wetlands, and the limitations. We looked at it, we explored it, and we couldn't do what we are not in a position to invest the kind of money that was necessary to convert that to a useful purpose to us. So we put it out for bid. Frankly, we put it out for bid and received $150,000. It was suggested by some that that's accepted. Several members of the school committee and myself didn't agree, so we worked the bid analysis dramatically and created a marketing approach, and it resulted in more than double that, $360,000. The $360,000 we received is in our coffers now. It's one-time money, and we would use it to pay for about half of the cost of the new roof repair. The repair of the roof, which has no bonding impact to you, it will be entitled under the Mass School Building Authority regulations of 53% reimbursement. So conceivably, if it costs $700,000 to fix the next section of the roof, we comply with the state, get it approved, and meet their other obligations, we get $350,000 back from the state, which we'll put back in the E&D account. Okay, so, and we won't ask you for any money for the borrow. And what's kind of a kidding area, we've had so many requests for tours given the recognition that the system has had, including the top 25 high schools in the nation, things of that nature, that I started charging non-educators. I didn't charge you, I didn't charge Pat.
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't charge any finance committee member, but I'm saying that where we've had people come in from California, New York, and everywhere else, we just started charging them $75.
Well, worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
It's like date night.
Yeah, well, yeah, $15 of the 75 goes to the culinary. They backbill me, Jimmy.
I didn't get fed.
I know.
I didn't either.
No,
Yeah.
no. Well, you guys
I
are,
remember you pointing out where the food was, but we went on right on by.
well, it was another strategy to raise a few dollars here or there. And it's funny because the first time I did this was for a team from New York. And they're glad they had the money to pay for it, and we bought easels for the art teacher. Okay, so just little ways to do things and have some fun doing it. We continue to pursue additional contributions from various sources, and whether it be some of the area golf courses and other kinds of things that are done. If you look at the last page of what was put together for you to give you some summary, here are some of the projects that were done specific to Sutton, okay? And they range from some landscaping and painting done on the town hall, work done on hiking trails, some new plumbing for Waters Farm. We continue to share things with relationships with our sister school systems, certainly including Sutton. And then, in summary, we do hundreds of projects each year. So these are examples. They're concrete. It's an alternative. What we do. And people have made inquiry with us, saying, well, how do you do that? How do you chase down additional money? How do you get $10 when you only ask for one, kind of thing? And so, well, this is an example of how we try to do that. Questions?
First, thank you for, again, I want to echo what was said before. Appreciate both of you by coming in. Couple questions that I have, just when I was reading my notes from last year. We had 108 students from Sutton. Are we still at 108?
114.
114 now?
Yeah. Let me mention though, Pat, since there was a little confusion on this matter. On October 1, which is the snapshot of when you count your kids, we had 115 Sutton students, so one
Okay.
more, okay? And we alerted the state of that when we submitted, because each student has an ID number, okay, that the state monitors. Subsequent to that, in our conversations with the state, they indicated that there was a double count for one student. We said, oh, what happened? Well, what is that? So that the Sutton school system had also reported that student with an ID number. And so further investigation showed that while the student was with us on October 1, which means legitimately he or she could be counted, shortly after October 1, when we thought she was absent, I guess, she enrolled in the Sutton schools. Eventually, the paperwork catches up with each other. So it was, we totally agreed with the state that if in the fact that the student was enrolled shortly after October 1 in your home system, then, and they educated the student, then they should get the money for the student. So we changed our number from 7 to 6 and worked with the state to do that, which is just the right thing to do.
Okay, no,
But there was a little confusion on that matter.
Yeah, but my question is I'm trying to look forward. So are applications up? Are you anticipating that we will be greater than 114 next year or down?
Applications closed last Friday. I have yet to see the totals. The new applications just came in.
Okay,
The deadline for the new application.
I think the interviews are tomorrow.
And interviews are.
Okay, so I'm a bit premature in my question.
Yeah.
But that leads me to a thing is that last year, it's okay to just tell me that you can't answer this question if I'm treading where I shouldn't be. But there were other towns of the 13 who were having some issues, and there were talks that they were going to restrict, the towns were going to restrict the number of students that they were going to allow to go. Douglas was very vocal about that. And I'm not asking you, but if towns have done that, then that would mean that more students from Sutton could go. So as I'm looking at this and thinking about what we can anticipate, are towns doing that? Grafton's numbers were way down. You made the remark that Grafton's applications last year were in fact, your word was they are way down. So if you haven't counted them, how are things going relative to people wanting to go to BVT?
Well, one of the things I'd point out, when you talk about the town of Douglas, which you referenced as an example, it's not so much the town, it's certain individuals who have a tendency to share their view. I'm not so sure. I mean, I don't get to speak for 13 towns. I just get to speak for Valley Tech, that kind of thing. So that some people have empowered themselves where they feel they speak for the town, but when we speak to other people in that community, they have a very different viewpoint. Let me just say that. Okay, right after the state of the federal address. But I mean, we had a situation where at least one system has attempted to restrict the accessibility, okay, or the information sharing. And that is, more often than not, that's resulted in an increase in the way in which the students, as you point out, when someone applies for a job, say, I really want that job. I really want to be it. That has consistently backfired because the students who are, whatever, creative and entrepreneuristic and fight for every right today, it actually results in a new form of commitment and pursuit to get into Valley Tech. So it's not a good plan to attempt to do that, to create an uninformed public when the 13 towns created Valley Tech so they would have this opportunity and to be able to look at it. Now, Valley Tech has a very unusual position in the whole state of Massachusetts. It has 1,000 candidates applying for a given year, only from the district alone. We don't sell any seats. We have people who have told us they've moved into the district so they can come to the school, which is a bit, premature because there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to get in. Their son or daughter will get, or granddaughter, or whatever, grandson, will get into the system. Sutton has had an increase in the past 2 years. It had a decrease 3 years ago. Some of it would be associated with the confidence people have in the sending school system. I don't disagree with that. Okay.
I'm not trying to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I'm not arguing with you. I like this school. I'm just trying to think about it from a financial standpoint. Do we anticipate that we're gonna have more kids if other towns are saying you can't do it? You're telling me that that didn't happen. So, and I don't mean to cut you off. I'm with you. It's a great school. What's the total enrollment at BVT? And my follow-up question is do you anticipate it growing next year?
It's grown every year, okay, incrementally, by 5, 6, 7, not in leaps and bounds, okay? It has grown every year, okay? Sutton did not have
So
the...
what is your total enrollment for all towns?
Basically 1,252.
Okay.
And Sutton owns...
That won't go up by more than 10 next year?
That would be my prediction.
Okay.
The growth has been incremental or modest because we're pretty much at capacity kind of thing. There's not a lot of room to do an awful lot. Sutton is not the community that witnessed the greatest increase in students for for the next budget.
Okay.
Okay.
My other question from last time was, and then I'm done, is, Grafton, which I think is a mirror image of Sutton. I seem to know a little bit about Grafton. I was just kind of surprised at considering their size, the low number of students that they have there. And I had asked you last year if there was a reason for that, and maybe there's not. Do you have an opinion this year?
The town, several key players, finance committees and select persons in Grafton, and town manager, have raised issue with the lack of students from Grafton at the regional voc tech system. And so it seems to be an internal issue that they're raising that they have yet to resolve.
Well, our reason for the question was we were wondering if there was something being offered at Grafton that you were aware of that mirrored more for BVT that maybe we should look at here.
No, in fact, we have a hockey co-op with Grafton and us and a very successful hockey team in that regard. Now, Sutton has one with 2 other communities, okay? So we have partnerships with them. I hope that hasn't led to disinterest in us. I
think of the education more than playing hockey.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm saying that there are partnerships in it. I'm not aware of a given offering within the curriculum of Grafton that has been the issue to reduce the interest in coming to Valley.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Other questions?
I mean, yes, so, and thank you for coming here, both of you. It's fantastic to always hear an update from, another great school that we send our students to. I can't remember the term, there's a factor, I guess, of how it's all budgeted per student. Is that factor gonna change at all in this upcoming budget year? Higher, lower?
It's a great question. It's a conversation I had with Jim earlier today. I just wanted to make certain we were on the same page. Both of us follow the state-determined dollars and calculations. The state determined that the absolute minimum contribution, which is pretty much the state's determination of this community's ability to pay, to be 160,000 plus greater than a year ago, with the addition of only 6 students. I say only because 160,000 is a fairly significant swing. So I guess in comparison to the other 12 towns, the state, Department of Revenue, and others continue to look at this town as to being wealthier than the others or having a greater ability to pay. What we discussed in previous conversations is that it would be inappropriate and would be unfair that the state says, because you've done the right thing, because you haven't gone in the hole, you haven't taken risks that have resulted in poor financial management, you're certainly not a receivership, kind of thing, that there should be praise for that, not a financial complication. But in the way the state looks at property values and income values, it continues to look at this town having a greater capacity than several others, actually all others, okay? and then the state makes that calculation. That's out of our control, okay? In fact, we don't even file our reports that make that determination. But in the most recent plan for FY20, the state has arrived at even that absolute minimum obligation component of the budget is 161,000 greater for this community. Does that answer your question?
It does, it does. I had the same reaction I did last year, which is, it sounds like it's a legislative issue to attend to, but ultimately, that's the factor that's being used at this point.
Yeah, what we're lobbying for is greater state support. If greater state support occurs, hypothetically, you would hope that they would reduce the state in its thinking and planning, wouldn't say, yeah, education needs more money, because they didn't build in inflationary formulas for special education, for so many things. And the solution is to place the burden on the communities. You know what I mean? To a greater, if the state would be willing to look at, and they have to identify additional revenue streams, which they have yet to do, okay? And to share in the burden of additional funding, rather than transfer it at 60% to the municipalities, which is the current process. It makes it, you know, you may have heard me say this. 26 years ago, when I came here to present the first time, I had 75% of the bill paid by the state. I was even welcome. No, I'm just kidding. I'm saying that, no, I'm saying that it was an easier sell, with 25% being shared across 13 towns. I mean, Jimmy Smith's job was easier too, okay? But then the state hasn't kept anywhere close to that, okay? In fact, it probably is not even, well, it's less than 40%. So from a 75% subsidy and partner to a less than 40%. We'll see what happens with all the conversations relative to new funding. Again, is that helpful?
It is, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
So, just, I know we talked briefly about the OPEB issue and so forth. Do you know what your current OPEB liability is? I know we went through a whole revaluation just recently.
I have to pull it up. I usually get that stuff for the budget presentation, sorry.
Okay.
I thought you'd be so pleased with 183,000.
I thought it was great. That was great. And congratulations also on the health insurance. I mean, that's terrific. So, you know, I know it's like Pat said, and we've said many times, and I think we've had this discussion. You know, it's a great Valley Tech is a great school, and you do some great things. And the issue that we, I'm sure every other town in this district has, is affording you as our vocational school. So, you know, last year there was and because we have very limited resources, and then, you know, we get whether it's via an increase in the number of students or an increase in your overall budget and so forth, whatever it is, it obviously directly impacts us, and you know, our usual whack-a-mole game of, you know, when this budget expense goes up, we got to hit somewhere else and, you know, try and make things work. So I'm just trying to understand where your budget, where you're finding the budget increases this year. If last year you had a $400,000 health insurance increase, so without that increase, if you still have a 3.9, almost 4% increase in an expected budget, where are those numbers coming from?
Well, we don't have a budget yet. Okay, we're in the midst of bringing the 3.9 down to 3.53, and then we'll see where we can go from there. So we're in the midst of the cutting process.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's, as we acknowledged, to come this early. Okay.
No, I'm glad you did. Yeah, I'm glad you.
We're glad to do it. Okay,
Yeah.
but I don't know where the dust settles there until such time as we finalize the budget. But even the 3.9, which I mentioned, is, you know, we were yesterday. Today, I think we're at 3.53, okay? And we're basing that, if we can draw more money from the state, which I mentioned to Jim as well, while we lobby for it, if we get more money, then we can continue to reduce the assessment. It might not reduce to 3.53, but it reduces the assessment, because we can draw state money rather than ask the town for it. And it was
Right, but where are you finding the expense, you know, if health insurance was such a big part of that overall increase last year, where are you finding those
Well,
increases this year?
Here's one of the things I want to point. Okay, just if you, one of the reasons I gave you this sheet, if you look at the bottom, what do you pay for with us? Okay, all right, and so what kind of cost items do you have? Okay, and we accept full debt, it's decreasing. The only debt we have is based on the previous 36, there's 6 years left, I believe, on the unanimously approved debt for the $36 million expansion that was reimbursed at 75.5%. What other kind of things are in our budget that you wouldn't find in a local K through 12 budget? Here are some categories. So where does our money go? That the municipal usually covers, okay? These would be any capital improvements. I mean, we're doing sidewalks or driveways or anything, we're paying for it. All workmen's compensation, we pay for it. Any pension obligations, they're ours, they're not passed on to the community. Any unemployment, they're ours. We have to ask you for the funding for it. Well, we have a school resource officer. The town doesn't pay for it, we pay for it, okay? We have all the health insurance, which is better off, any life insurance, any property insurance, any casualty insurance, any trash, recycling, snow removal. The DPW doesn't do it, we do it, okay? Any revenue shortfall, we agree, and we'll, as you look on the left-hand side of the margin here, anything that changes after we come forward with the budget after March 7th, we'll live with it. We don't come back. There's no special town meeting, no special funding, no air conditioning, no truck, it's all ours. Any revenue, any of the central office, we are our own central office. Any of the legal expenses, they're ours, okay? So, the treasurer, we have a treasurer that we pay for. We have an independent audit, it costs about $30,000 a year. And so, when you look at us, you have to take in mind or consider we have nobody else to pass off certain expenses. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not what we need to do. So we're a one-time request, and I'll once I see with the final budget, we can look at what the drivers are, okay, what survives, what doesn't survive. I mean, there's a variety of requests that I don't think we can afford to include them, okay? This is all our collective bargaining. The regional transportation contract is active, so it's not like a prediction. The collective bargaining, the raise given to the collective bargaining process was 2.6. It's the highest of the 3 years. It's the high water. First one was 1.6, okay? I noticed that the federal government supported, although the president can still decide of his stance on this, that the federal military people were granted a 2.6 raise. So we're in line with that. We negotiated 3 years ago. It's everything. It's kit and caboodle kind of thing. So every possible expense that we have to cover, we build it into a budget and then have never come back. So there's a summary response to your question, and I'll be glad to identify the specific, what I think to be a 3.53 increased drivers, but they will include all of those items.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. I understand. I'm just trying to just make sure that to get the point of this committee and this really this town and all the other towns, that we have such limited resources. It's extremely difficult to meet this increase. It really, really is when we have so many other needs. So, just if you can keep that.
Okay, but given Jeffrey's question earlier, the vast majority of the increase of the assessment was determined by the state. Okay, the 160,000. If we asked for you for 180,000 more from a year, 160 to 180 covers certain categories in a budget, and it was determined by the Department of Revenue, not even by us. See, I'm saying, as far as what we can massage or move, so when we meet inflationary cost of whatever it might be, and become whole in our single request, but a major factor for us is the state has switched and transferred the financial responsibilities to you and the other 12 towns, which in your case results and we, Jim and I talk about this all the time. I'm not saying it's welcome news, okay? There's no joy in this, okay? But it's, if we could do it, everything would be equalized. That's the way we used to do it before ed reform kicked in. And they said, no, we're going to alter that based on the ability of the 351 cities and towns, on two factors, income and property. Okay, so they changed the rules. They're in the midst of trying to decide. I don't think the changes that are being proposed now are going to be dramatically impacted by the previous court decision of wages and property values altering the direction that the state takes.
Mhm.
Now, the state talked about 2.6% increased revenue for 11 months. Then December hit, and they talked about it being below projections, and then decided that that was attributable to the federal government tax law changes, certain capital gain changes, and what else? And the fact that the January 15th was the next deadline, so next calendar year, for income tax payments. Now, the January numbers are out, and the state's announcing that it's again below its January projections.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know if that's political posturing or not, okay? The legislature has given us the impression, and most of my colleagues believe, that the state legislature will increase the governor's allocations to education. Hasn't happened yet. I mean, wasn't supposed. In fact, what's unusual about this sequence is the Senate went before the governor. That doesn't usually happen. The Senate Educational Committee, even before the Senate Educational Committee chairs were appointed, because that's the pressure of the public saying you got to put more money in education. The only problem, not the only, the challenge that is, it's good to wave the flag, but not until you identify where the money's coming from. But I just,
Sure.
okay? By taking the lead that you offered, by asking the town managers any suggestions how best to, in fact, one of the things that Jim and I agreed, that it would be helpful to have one of the town managers speak to the bargaining groups at my system. The first time it's ever done that, okay? And we agreed that Adam Gaudette, the town manager for Northridge, would be an appropriate spokesperson to represent the town managers. Correct?
Absolutely.
Right. And so I invited Adam in, and he did a nice job, just as Jim and I both thought he would. And he spoke to the teachers' union and to the school committee's negotiation team. I think that helped. So we're always looking to find alternative ways without asking for whether, I don't know how many people pay for their own roof. We do.
Yep.
That's our way to try to keep it as low as possible, to have no impact. I can't do that. And I was apologetic. Last year was the highest budget increase that I think I presented in 25 years at the time. This one's less. Headed closer to 3.5.
Okay. You all set? You all set? Okay. Thanks so much for coming.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think we have an understanding of where you're coming from, and hopefully you can, I guess we're looking for just understanding the sensitivity that we have to what the finances are, and this time, in every other town, I'm sure you'll hear the same thing, so.
Yeah, what we generally do, again, I doubt Jim would disagree, okay, that we'll make used to be Bob Recor and others, I know what you had subcommittee activities and liaisons, but I have never hesitated to send the forecast or the prediction of, hey, how's it looking? I mean, my cover budget letter talks about the relationship and the responsibilities of the 13 town managers, and it is most appropriate for us, not to be controlled by anybody, but to recognize the challenges that they face on your behalf. And that I believe we gain through brainstorming ideas and strategies, kind of thing, OPEB, health insurance, anything else. So we try to give a heads-up prediction to minimize the conflict and the disruption. And so that's happened already this year. And I'm not aware of a town manager conversation. It's early in the game, but there's been several, where the town manager says, oh, you killed us. And they say, oh, yeah, well, okay, not great news, but it's kind of in the ballpark of what we anticipated, because they follow the same numbers that the state drives a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to work in harmony and out of respect, not to sabotage or disrupt, okay? And that's another thing we try to do. I know that I'm not trying to sound like a martyr to the process, but some of my colleagues are saying, are you kidding me? I'm not going to give a forecasted number. Suppose it's wrong. And they won't take that risk. And I got that. And I'm a veteran. I've been doing this for a long time. But we try to minimize the pain, find alternative strategies, figure out pick your brain, if you will, ask you for suggestions. And even invite town managers in to speak to our groups who make some of the decisions, and hopefully impact and influence the teachers for the next round. Next year, FY '20 will be a negotiation year for the next probably 3-year plan, and hopefully it's affordable. We kind of it's reasonable and affordable, and shows respect for our teachers,
Yep.
and also the ability of the public to pay. That's what we try.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks again.
That's okay.
He's not gonna let Julie talk?
Hmm?
No, I'm kidding.
Doesn't have a
Oh,
microphone.
I'm a fan of white in this stuff.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Julie.
coming in.
I will tell you this, sitting on our budget subcommittee, it's gotta be me.
Yeah.
Great team of people who, I think we have school committee members. I'm just giving up, I'll talk.
No,
about
it's
it.
kind of,
It's, the people that sit on this committee question everything. And sometimes you even say, are you really gonna question that? But everything comes under scrutiny, and there's a lot of back and forth. And I will tell you that the budget process is well-run, it's very well organized, and there's so much consideration, and there's so much creative thinking, especially on the administration's part of how can we get what we need for our students without it affecting the towns? Without going back to the towns and saying we need more funding for this. And that's when we look at the grants and we look at all the different ways that we can try to continue to be a wonderful education institution. It's a great process, and I hope that you know that. The school is, your feet are held to the fire more than once as to say, no, that's not gonna work. 2 years ago, plow truck, was it 2 years ago, the plow truck? The floorboards are routed through in the plow truck. The seat is held together with duct tape. We plow our own parking lot. It was a bone of contention, and the ideas that came up with, that were presented to try to find an alternative funding source for it, it was amazing to watch, and it was a great collaborative effort. So I just want you all to know that the process is a very creative one, and every time we meet, we are trying to get to the best numbers that we can.
we've had 8 to 10 meetings, I guess, at this juncture, relative to building the budget, and the plow truck was a welded chassis of 2 different trucks, and so we could use it. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Great.
Mm.
Thanks. By the way, on your way out, we've also decided on charging for appearances at our meetings, so
Is there
we can.
Is there snacks?
No food.
Thank you.
So, next on the agenda is a budget update from Jim Smith.
Thank you. And, as Dr. Fitzpatrick said, we've been in constant contact with each other. We know the impact that BVT has on our budget. And we did have a meeting this last fall. I got an estimate of the number of students that are attending Blackstone. So we did put a placeholder in the budget of $150,000. Now, as he mentioned, the number's more like $185,000. So at least we had a ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping they can continue to reduce those costs and come down closer to our number. For 6 additional students to pay $185,000, that's just, we bring in roughly $600,000 a year in new revenue through Proposition 2.5 and new growth,
and, you know, have to pick up $200,000 for
Right.
Blackstone Valley is just, it's tough to take.
Yeah.
You know, the fact is, the budget is in relatively good shape at this point in time. I'm presenting to the Board of Selectmen February 19th, and I can do a presentation for this board shortly thereafter. I don't have a problem with that. We are aware of the big unknowns that we usually hit with. Healthcare, for instance, is the big unknown, usually during the preliminary budget process. We've got an early renewal from Fallon that we've agreed to, 6.9%, which, in our opinion, is favorable considering the experience we had. You know, we've had a few cancer cases and some high liability cases, and our experience wasn't all that great. So I thought that was beneficial to the town. You know, we're trending in a much better way over the last few months, but that's over the last year, so we're paying for that to a certain extent. I'd be interested in talking to Dr. Fitzpatrick on how we got a 0. That's virtually unheard of
Yeah.
in municipal health, but you know, we'll have that conversation at another time. So ultimately, as Dr. Fitzpatrick said, the governor released this Chapter 70 number, $20 per student. That's $26,520 for the town of Sutton. That's cool. And the unrestricted general government aid, or former lottery money that the town receives, was $21,000 and change. So the positive part is some of our assessments and charges went down as well. One of those big charges is sending tuition. When students are enrolled in a different school other than Sutton, we have to pay for sending them there. And we've had a decrease from 2019 to 2020, roughly $30,000. So overall, our state aid is going up close to $100,000.
Yeah.
But, you know, what 50 of that is roughly Chapter 70 and UGA monies. The rest is charges. Pilot increased by $10,000, and some other small charges have changed as well. You know, Norfolk Aggie was another big unknown at this point in time last year. Right now, there are no new students attending Blackstone, Norfolk Agricultural School. So we have, what, 5 students attending, one graduating senior, so.
6, and one's graduating.
Yeah, so next year, in 2020, we have 5. Oh, I hope that's the number. You know, an increase in that is $24,000 each student. That's a big hit. And last year, we had 3 students attend Norfolk Aggie, I'm sorry. And that kind of blew the budget out of the water a little bit. So right now, we do have property insurance. I'm still waiting on that number. It's an unknown. We have the police station we're bringing on. We're paying that property insurance for the first time. Builder's risk was carried by the developer. And so we're waiting to see what that bill will be. But those are the unknowns, and we pretty much know them. So right now, the budget looks good. You know, what I need from you folks is, you know, a public hearing schedule.
Sure. Yep.
You know, I've got a draft one before you. If you want to change that around and have additional departments or different days, that's fine with me. And the other thing I want to talk about quickly tonight, and it is running a little late, is the capital plan. Right now, it's a draft capital plan. I'm proposing it as part of my preliminary budget hearing in 2 weeks. So the second page is the draft capital plan. I'm going to go off of this versus the third page. This is easier to understand the different items. Do you want me to go through each item? I can do that.
I mean, you can go kind of quickly on some
Let me
of them.
try to do this. You know, that the items in darkened in the middle of the section, schools mainly, those are green community grants that we're applying for.
There are hot water heaters in the Early Learning Center and the elementary school. We've previously placed 4 boilers in both of those schools, 2 in each school, and those were entirely paid for through the Green Communities program. So that's the beauty of that program. We've received almost $1 million in funding from that program that has
Work.
replaced systems that would eventually have to be replaced, that were ending towards the end of life.
Good work. That's great.
And we put $100,000 in for a chiller in the elementary school, so you probably know about that chiller. You know, we've been talking about that for years. We are applying for the Green Communities grant, $150,000 through that grant process, and we're funding $100,000 in our capital plan. We don't want to just one grant for $250,000 for the Green Communities, because you know the chance of that being funded, it could be kicked out. So we're saying we're putting some skin in the game. You know, we're going to give you $100,000, and then we're going to apply for the hot water heaters as well as part of that program. You know, the big part on page 3, it breaks down the article into the funding sources. This is the largest capital plan we've had in a long time, there are 3 major items that are being funded through borrowing and eventually being repaid through the Capital Stabilization Fund. So those items are a piece of fire apparatus down in Station 3. We're replacing Engine 3, which, if you've seen that engine, it's a 1987 vehicle apparatus that was purchased as one of 3 pieces of apparatus that were purchased at that point in time in 1987. This is the last piece to be replaced. The Engine 2, which was replaced a couple years ago, was one of those 3 engines at the time. So that's a big item. That's $825,000. That's the worst case scenario. My hope is that we can get a better price through the bidding process, et cetera, but that's just a placeholder. $600,000 for paving Central Turnpike. That road constantly comes up as a major issue in the town of Sutton. And the major issue is it's a cut through from 395 to 146, and you know, 18-wheelers constantly use that as a you know, GPS rerouting kind of area. So the road is just taking a beating, and we are planning on repaving from Uxbridge Road to Route 146. And I don't know the distance of that. It's roughly maybe a mile. And if we have any additional money, we can go back further down the road towards potentially Fuller, you know, and pave more, although that's in relatively decent condition from Fuller to Uxbridge. But that's another large item that we're going to borrow for and repay through the Capital Stabilization Fund. And the third is a 6-wheeler dump truck that in the past we've paid for those vehicles through Chapter 90 funds. You know, when we changed that philosophy a couple years ago, feeling that we needed to use all Chapter 90 funds to repave the roads, not to buy large pieces of equipment that we use for plowing and sanding and salting, whatever. So this is, you know, an example of, you know, this $210,000 in previous years would have been out of Chapter 90. Now it's coming out of the Capital Stabilization Fund. And I think that's a wise use of that, which after we purchase all of these items, assuming the worst case scenario, we still have $200,000 remaining in the Capital Stabilization Fund. And that will grow, you know, in a couple years up to, you know, $800,000 to $1 million. So it'll quickly replenish itself as long as we don't deplete it, and we'll be in good shape.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's the majority of that. There is a lot of projects down at the school, all necessary. You know, a few of these items were underestimated last year. The rear egress down at the elementary school is falling apart. We didn't get a good quote. We did get a quote after the fact, and it came in $140,000 more than we had anticipated in last year's capital plan. You know, the wastewater treatment facility down at the schools is in tough shape. and we're doing everything we can to maintain it. We're investing, what is that, $60,000 in that. You know, the big issue is the system itself, the tank, and that's 25 years old, and it's nearing end of life. We're trying to find a way to keep it going. Probably have, if all the money we invest, another 3 to 5 years of keeping that, but then we don't know what we're gonna do. A major renovation is gonna have to occur if we're still relying upon that wastewater treatment plant and don't have sewer down at that location. You know, so we are working on that.
Where are we on the sewer? I don't want to get off of this.
Sure. That's another item, capital item that you don't see in this plan, but we are currently under design for sewer coming from the villas to the center of town. And we're hoping to get that on the Maytown meeting. But it really, a lot of that depends upon how quickly the design gets done. They are meeting periodically with Dawn, but they'll also meet with the Sewer Commission, and then they'll meet with the Board of Selectmen, hopefully within the next month or so. The estimated cost is somewhere, in my opinion, between $2 and $3 million to bring sewer up to the center. And that will relieve Town Hall, which has a failed septic system. I don't think that's big news to anybody. People know that we pump out our sewer system on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. It's a problem. Not only costly, but there is environmental issues associated with that we want to address. And then the second phase is obviously bringing it down to schools. We have to do the same sort of test that we did bringing it up to the center of town, doing boring tests and so forth. The additional issue is identifying a water supply, whether those wells have the capacity to ultimately flush the toilets, because we have a gray water system down there right now that takes care of that for us, but it's costly, and the system is aging, and eventually gonna have some significant problems. So, you know, it's a lot of things going on, but hopefully we're working on phase one. We've been negotiating with some property owners to put a pump station up on Boston Road at the bottom of the hill coming up. That's been moving along pretty well, so.
Thank you.
No, I mean, it's great that this capital stabilization fund can be used for this. It's really good.
It really is, because ultimately, this is not an unusual capital plan if you take out those 3 large items that are paid for the capital stabilization fund. I mean, typically, $600,000, $800,000 is our normal borrowing, and you know what we're doing is using $550,000 in free cash. Even after we use that money, we still have roughly $900,000 to $1 million that will turn over to next fiscal year. And won't use, depending upon snow and ice and other factors.
Sure. Great.
So, any questions on that I can take, or if you want to just think about that?
Yep.
I just have a quick question on
Sure.
Replacing a chiller at the high school,
Yeah.
not part of a new building?
It's the elementary school.
Okay, so it's high school.
It does?
High school chiller, 2 compressors?
It's above the red line.
Yeah.
Line
At the top. Those are chillers at the high school, and that's $12,000. And I don't know why, but I assume they ran out of warranty, and there's been some issues with the conditioning of the air down there. So that was a recommendation from the school department to replace those.
But it's part of the new building, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah, and that building, you know, some of those systems are warranted, and I know the school department has gotten some of those warranties, but I don't know about that system. I can find out for you, though.
It just seems a little soon.
It does, it certainly does, no doubt.
Okay, so we should pick them some dates. I mean, these are suggested dates.
Yeah,
that we
that's
have.
just from last year.
Yeah.
And I just updated it for this year, correct dates. But if you want to, I think it worked fairly well. Not having BVT and the school department on the same night.
Yep.
Not to separate them too, like they need to be separated, but there's a lot of information to go on between those two, and I like to give them their own time. And the last night, typically the school department and planning articles, because we do have citizens petitions and other planning articles that go before Maytown meeting. The sewer, probably debt exclusion will be presented on the article night.
Jim, when is the town meeting?
It is the second Monday in May. I think that's the 13th. Let me, is it, Jeff?
It is.
Yeah, it's
May
Monday the
13th?
13th.
And when are the elections?
It's towards the end of May.
May 28th.
Oh,
May 28th?
good.
That'd be a Tuesday.
You'll still be here.
So, when are we gonna do the budget? You're gonna present the budget?
Yeah, I mean, I can, if this board wants, I can come to the finance committee the following week. That Tuesday is a non-selectman meeting night. What is that?
20, did you say the 19th was your?
The 26th, I think. Is that a
26th?
Tuesday?
Yeah, that would be the Tuesday.
That Tuesday night, I could do the.
What month are we in?
February.
February?
I think that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great.
February 26th will be the
26th.
budget?
6:30, then, great.
No, I have a question when you're.
I'm also, go ahead.
I thought we had these things like back to back, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then, as opposed to, I mean, if the meeting's not till May 13th, then maybe it doesn't matter to spread them out that much, one a week.
I don't know why, and we did last year, I think. We had a Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20, whatever the dates were, the 26th and the 27th roughly. But I felt like that does give additional time for the planning board to get their articles completed and
I
resolved.
guess that's what I was, is April 3rd,
Early.
when,
Okay.
is that a date that they're gonna be substantially ready? Because I know they come in here and it's,
I mean, I can confirm that.
yeah, I think that's the one that's.
That's later than it was last year. Last year we had some interesting issues come up and some solar petitions and so
Right.
forth, but I don't know of any citizens petitions in the queue right now.
Okay.
So that may work.
Okay.
But I'll let you know on that.
All right. So we'll have these keep these as tentative, and then when
Yeah,
we meet next week.
we can resolve them when we do the budget presentation
Right,
on
on
the
the 26th.
26th and
Perfect.
confirm these if you want.
So March 21st is a Thursday, not a Wednesday.
All right, that's pretty much all I had.
Thank you.
All right, quite welcome.
Any other business? We don't have any meetings, any minutes to approve, I don't believe. So I guess we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, we adjourned. Thanks.